welcome everyone to a very special Zoom presentation this evening. I'm Natalie Goodwin. I'm the middle school counselor at Pine Lake Prep. I'm very happy to introduce our guest speaker this evening, Miss Melanie Hempy of ScreenStrong.com. Melanie is a personal friend of mine. She's worn many hats over the years. She's a former nurse. She's owned at one point a very successful home business. Camera, don't remember the camera for moms bit, or
yeah, did all that.
Cameras, helping moms take family photos and stuff. But I guess around 7 or 8 years ago, in raising her youngest twins, she got really interested and has really just delved in to this and is just, unbelievably passionate now about helping families kind of navigate all the screens and all that we're all concerned about, and we're trying to get to know how to best navigate it. So she's really dedicated this part of her life to helping families. I'm really proud of her. The parent organization is called Families Managing Media. We'll post some of these things later. ScreenStrong is their brand, and ScreenStrong.com is or ScreenStrong Inc. Right, is also
ScreenStrong.com is the website.
Is the website, right?
Yeah.
She also has a podcast that and I'll post all these links for you guys later. But so I'm, as a counselor, I know that I see some of the effects that a lot of the screens are having on our kids. I know we have parents with us tonight. They're also, worried, curious, concerned, all of those things. So we're going to delve in right now and let Melanie share all her fabulous research and personal history and all of her knowledge with us.
Yeah. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you so much. I hope everybody here can hear me, and we'll just get started. I have so much to share. I can actually do this presentation in a 6-hour workshop. So I'm not going to give you that long tonight, but I'm going to give you an overview, just a real overview of the pathway that I have figured out as far as screens go. And we're going to start with some information about some brain science, and then we're going to dive into the why boys and girls and how boys and girls use screens differently, and talk about how the depression is sort of reaching this generation unlike any other generation. But Natalie is correct. I've had a lot of hats that I've worn, and I have 4 children. I have an older son who is the reason why I do this work now. He was a straight A student and did very well in high school, but he played a lot of video games. And when he went to college, he did not stop and he dropped out. And this whole organization started as a result of Adam's journey and our journey as a family in dealing with a child that was super, super dependent on their screen. In fact, addicted to video games. And yet he was extremely functional with his grades. He had straight A's, and I missed it. I totally missed it. And I'm a pretty good detective, and it was very shocking how I missed all the signs and symptoms. So he ended up dropping out of state, actually, and ended up going to the Army for 5 years. And he's back now, and he's doing fine. But we had quite a detour with that journey. And as a result of that, I dove into the research. I used my medical background and my nursing background, and I met up with tons of neuroscientists and physicians, and I traveled all over the country, and I learned so much about this issue. I had no idea that you could be addicted to screen, but it is very much like a gambling addiction. If you want to kind of understand how that works, that's kind of hard to process addiction. It's really hard because you think of addiction as being a chemical. It does actually stimulate dopamine in the child's brain, and that's what the child gets addicted to. And quite frankly, many adults also grow dependent on those high levels of dopamine that we get too when we get on our phones or play a video game. So I have 3 little books on Amazon. This is Will Your Gamer Survive College? And that's Adam's story, and gives you the warning signs. You might think about your son if you have a gamer. And then the other one is this one, and it's, can your teen survive and thrive without a smartphone? And that's the story of my daughter, because after we did that experiment on Adam, kind of messed that up a little bit, I decided I'm not doing another experiment on another child. So she grew up all through high school without a smartphone. She had the equivalent of a flip phone, just a talk and text phone. And we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. And then we have a little book called the ScreenStrong Solution. And that goes through the outline of how to get your kids off if you feel like that they're having some problems. But tonight, I'm not going to have time to go through everything that I have. I just want to touch base on a couple of the high points. And I want to leave about 20 minutes at the end for questions. So I'm going to go by this stuff kind of fast and just hang on, it'll be fine. Just make some notes of some questions, and Natalie, you'll help me with the questions when I'm done here. But I think it's super important to first start with what it takes to build a healthy brain. You know, back when our parents were raising us, they didn't have to know brain science. All they had to do is throw us out in the backyard, and we came home and the lights came on, or the street lights came on. And we did everything we needed to do. We played with our friends. We worked out conflicts. We were in the sunshine. We were in the dirt. We did a lot of problem solving, and we were patient as we had to wait for people and ride our bikes places. But now parents really need to understand a little bit about brain development, because our kids' brains are not getting developed the way they should, because they spend so much time. In fact, it's 9 hours a day is the average time that kids are spending on screens. So I want to tell you 3 really quick things about brain development. The first thing is that activities shape your child's brain, even more than genetics. What your child does will shape his brain. The next thing is this thing called neuronal pruning, which I had no idea. Oh my goodness, I wish I had known this earlier in my parenting journey. But neuronal pruning is something that happens around puberty, where the brain actually removes unused pathways just to make it more efficient. So you hear the statement a lot about, if you don't use it, you lose it. Well, that's very true for brain development. So if our kids and your teenagers, if they don't learn their social skills early during this puberty stage and through middle school and high school, it's going to be really hard to back up and fix it and relearn it. It takes 25 years for the frontal cortex to be developed. This is crazy. The brain develops from the back to the front. So the movement center is in the very back of the brain. That's the first to develop. And if your child doesn't get enough movement, then it's very hard for the rest of the brain to develop. So that's why little toddlers and lower school kids, they just run all the time. I know a lot of schools are adding more PE classes because they know how important movement is. And then toward puberty, that middle part of the brain starts to develop, and that's the limbic area. That's the emotion center. And then around 25, it takes that many years for that frontal cortex to be fully developed. So this is the problem. In fact, I did a class where mom stood up after this slide and she said, "I'm good. That is all I needed to know," because she started realizing that her teenager just wasn't there yet. And, you know, maturity is something that you can't force, and you can't make it go faster. So there's a lot of things we have in our material about what is necessary for healthy brain development. And here's just a couple things. I won't read them all, but these are just things that help build executive function skills and things that are really important. But this is really important to understand when you're talking about screen time in kids. So there are 2 things I want to focus on here in this part. One is that kids, their need for belonging is really strong, and it is a very critical developmental task. They have to belong somewhere. They're going to seek to fill that void no matter what. So as parents, it's really important for us to keep an eye on what is influencing our kids. And we know that attachment to family is the most important biological developmental task. And I feel like in our culture today, with all the families I work with and all the work I've done in this research, I feel like that if you could sum it up in one phrase, our generation, this generation of these teens that are being raised on these phones and being raised on social media, they are becoming detached very early from their family foundation, from their family unit. You may feel like that if you're in the audience. You may feel like, oh my gosh, I'm losing my kids. All they want to do is play video games. All they want to do is get on their phones. I don't even know who they are anymore. We don't talk. And if you're feeling that way, you are correct. This is a family attachment issue. Kids are not being raised by adults anymore. They are being raised by peers. That's a really bad idea. And when we talk about the teenage brain specifically, there's some things about that part of development. I want to say, first of all, the brain is under construction during this time. Like I said a minute ago, the judgment center is not complete, and they're getting all of these new skills on board. They feel like they can do way more than they can do. They feel like they can multitask. They make fun of you because you can't multitask, and they think they can, but the bottom line is they can't. Of course, they can't multitask. Their reward center is in high gear. And what that means is during the stage of development, they are seeking novelty and they are seeking rewards. There's nothing wrong with your kids. They are not bad kids. This is how their brain is wired. When Adam went into the military, he went to the military for 5 years and he was airborne. And I'll never forget him telling me later when he came home and he was over 25, he said, "Mom, I can't believe I jumped out of airplanes." I'm like, I know, your brain wasn't quite formed yet. So of course you did those risky things. But the main thing here to remember is that intelligence is not maturity. I think this is one of the biggest things that parents, including me, I've made all the mistakes in the world around this issue. And I kept thinking that Adam was very mature because he was intelligent. He had all straight A's. So I assumed that that's what that means. And it doesn't mean that. Maturity is wisdom, and wisdom comes only with time and experience. We know that 90% of all adult addictions start in the teenage years. So this is how critical this period of development is. 90% of all adult addictions start in the teenage years. So it's very important for us to pay really close attention to what our kids are doing online. The higher your best friend's IQ is at the age of 11 or 12, the higher your IQ will be at 15. This is fascinating. This research is so fascinating. I think that many of our parents already intuitively knew that they had to be really careful about who we hung out with. That was a big deal. Like my mom, there were certain friends that she didn't want me hanging out with because she knew there were bad influences. And now we have research that says that you will take on the character qualities, the academic qualities of the friends and the people you hang around. So this is really important when we think about social media and video games and we think about what our kids are doing. The parenting science is fascinating too. Over the number of years, like the last 20 years, there's so much research that they don't really do this research anymore because they know what the best parenting style is. And it's this middle style. It's not the permissive and it's not the authoritarian. It is what they call authoritative or ideal. And it centers around leadership. So at ScreenStrong, we help parents understand that it's that we want you to think of your role as a coach, and you are coaching your kids. And if you have a really bad season or a bad basketball game, you're going to have to set your team down and you're going to coach them. You're not going to be mean to them, but you're also not going to let them decide what needs to happen. You are their coach. So if you can think of your role as a coach instead of a parent, actually, it kind of helps. I know it helps a lot of moms because they're so worried their kids aren't going to like them if they take the screens away or they don't get them a phone. And you've got to put that whole idea aside. Put on your coach's hat, get your whistle out. Natalie, I need to get some ScreenStrong whistles because truly when you can get that idea in your head, it's so much easier, to help your kids along. So as a coach, we all had coaches in our background where we would say, they weren't our best friends, but, they had our back. They pushed us till we hit our potential, and they weren't just always letting us do what we wanted to do. So a good coach has to go back to the basics. They have to get a new game plan, and they have to not be afraid to try different techniques if something isn't working with a player. And that's where ScreenStrong comes in to help you with that. So when we look at what the effects are of screens on a child's brain. Here's a slide that just goes through a few things. These are just the physical changes here. There's a lot of physical changes that happen after about 20 or 30 minutes of an interactive video game, for example, or scrolling social media and getting deep into the interweb on social media. The dopamine starts to get released in the brain because that is how these screens are designed. That is the design. It's not a bad thing necessarily. It's just like smoking. I'm not going to go shut down all the smoking tobacco companies. My kids just aren't going to smoke, and I have that choice. So what happens physically in a child's body is the fight flight area of their brain starts to get stimulated, and the adrenaline starts to rush, and their heart rate goes up, their blood pressure goes up, cortisol is released with the adrenaline, and we know that cortisol is the stress hormone. So I feel like if there's one word here that we can describe the physical changes for a child, it is stress. They think they're having fun, but it's like being on that roller coaster for hours and hours and hours and hours. Their body just can't handle it. I mean, you would never get on a roller coaster 5 times a day, but our kids are the equivalent of that. They're on their phones, they're on their social media, and they're just getting way too stimulated on all this. So there's a lot of chemical changes that occur. And then, of course, we know there's a lot of behavioral changes too. We know that when we just try to take a screen away from a child, even a middle schooler, they can still have a complete meltdown on the kitchen floor. It's the craziest thing. One mom told me she thought her son was having a seizure because she took Minecraft away from him. And she literally thought he was having a seizure. I mean, these are like half-grown kids that you would think would know how to handle this. If you try to take the phone away from your daughter, you'll probably get a lot of pushback on that. We know that kids are not resilient. We used to think the kids were resilient, and science has come along in the last 15 years when they're studying teenage brains, and they're realizing there are permanent problems that happen, especially when kids are on drugs. And when they are exposed to chronic stress, it actually changes their brain pathway. It changes the structure of their brain. We know this through MRIs. We see this with addiction. Kids who are addicted to pornography, their brain looks different than kids who aren't. Kids who play over amount of video games, their brains also look very different. So we know there's a lot about this that we don't know, but there's a lot that we do. And one of the biggest things is we can no longer just pretend our kids are going to be okay, that they're just going to get over it. They will have to deal with it at some point. And there are a lot of adults now, that are dealing with things that happened in their childhood. In fact, most of the time, the reason why there's mental health issues and depression, anxiety, or whatever, when you're an adult, you usually have to dig back into your childhood and figure out why. And so there's a lot of things happening in kids today that I think really are going to cause a lot of problems down the road. When you look at Erikson's stages of development, and you look at how the adolescent job is to figure out their identity, and one of the frustrating things is their role confusion, you can see how this is probably the worst stage or age to get your child involved in social media and gaming because of their stage of development. They are not ready for it. I would never suggest that you give a phone to a preschooler, but in some respects, a preschooler won't get quite as harmed by it because they're not doing the same thing that an adolescent teenager is doing. These adolescents are doing what their brain is wired to do, and that is to seek novelty, to take risk, honestly, to figure out who you are, to figure out your identity. And instead of coming home to do that, instead of sitting around the kitchen table talking to parents, they have shifted their whole search process over to gaming and social media. And so they're very confused. And that's where the anxiety comes in. And Natalie, I'm sure that you see this in your job, that the increase in the stress and anxiety, so much of it centers around the screen time. So let's talk about yeah, the difference between boys and girls and how they use their screen media different. And Natalie, I think, again, in your job is just fascinating. I would love to come and just sit in your office for a while, because I'm sure I would be able to see a lot of things that I know and I see in my work, but I haven't ever worked at a school where you see it probably a lot more.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So,
visit.
yeah, I'll come and just be in the background. So boys are very sensitive to rewards. They are very competitive generally. I'm speaking in general terms. Their limbic area of their brain is more active. This is just the fact. Girls are more sensitive to social losses, and their neocortex is more active. That's the social area of your brain. So if you can think about that just for a minute, that boys are going to be more sensitive to rewards and girls are more sensitive to losses. That's very interesting when we look at the technology they're using. So for a boy, he loves competition. He is stuck in this very immature stage, and we're handing him this video game that he's going to be really drawn to. Now, I'm not saying girls don't like video games. There are a lot of girls that do, but generally boys just really get drawn into that, and they're okay with this isolation. In fact, a boy is okay if he just has one other friend to play his video game with him. He is happy as a clam, and he can get lazy. He can lose his motivation for other things. I have on the slide that they don't have to take their clothes off to fit in. That's a true statement. The girls on the other side of the coin here, they are longing for more relationships, which is why they are so drawn to social media. They want to get 1,000 likes on every post. They want to have more people following them. They have a very strong drive to build their brand. They're constantly worried about their pictures. They're photoshopping them. They're taking 100 selfies in order to get the perfect one. There's very little room for failure on social media. Whereas with the boys, they can fail at a video game and they just hit the reset button and they do it again. And the thing with boys in video games is that they get better and they climb the ladder and they can watch their progress. But for a girl, she has so much more to lose because she has invested hours and hours and hours in this social media site that she has, or her feed. And many of those hours are sort of wasted because she'll put a post up and after just a few minutes, if it doesn't start getting likes, then she's going to take it down and she's going to fix it. And the problem is girls will research and they will study and they will figure out, well, why are her posts getting more likes than mine? And they will start to see, no one will tell her this, but they will start to see that the more sexualized the content is, the more likes it gets. This is just a proven fact. This isn't because she's a bad kid. She just starts to see that if I can take a picture and my blouse is hanging off or I've got lots of things showing, then I'm going to get more attention and I'm going to get more likes. In fact, it's very frustrating. The pressure to take off their clothes is what empowers them. But for a boy, he's just over here in the corner of the basement playing with his friend. He doesn't really care what anybody thinks about him. He doesn't really care about what he looks like, because in our culture today, the focus on appearance is more stacked against the girls. This is why they get depressed. And now, like I'm getting depressed just talking about this, because when we were in middle school, can you imagine what it would be like to wake up every day and just be so worried about what you did the night before and what you can post and what you're looking like and what your clothes are like? I mean, it's just so much pressure for them.
Exhausting.
Yeah, it is exhausting and it causes stress. And again, keep that in mind. It is stressful for them. They think it's fun. It is not fun. It is stressful. They're craving it. They don't know why they're craving it. You now know why they're craving it, because this is their brain development. They're in a stage of development, just like a toddler, when they want to crawl and climb on everything. That's their stage of development. We need to let them do that. With our adolescents, we need to let them be creative and find novelty and take risks, but it needs to be done in the real world, doing healthy things and not unhealthy, addictive things. So again, here, just a little bit about the difference in this video game and social media, because I think it's so easy to make changes in your home when you can understand. So video games are interacting in real time. And what this means is that your son or your daughter, if they're playing, they're getting an immediate response and they're reacting in real time. But for social media, it's not always real time. Sometimes you have to wait. You have to wait, and it feels like every minute is like an hour because someone's not responding to the cute picture that you just put up on your post. And so that waiting time is extremely stressful. And their heart rate goes up, their adrenaline, oh my gosh, nobody's liking it. What am I going to do? Whereas with a video game for a boy, he's moving ahead and there's no wait time. Games are not as portable as a phone. So I know you can game on your phone, but typically if a boy has a console, he's stuck somewhere in the house, and then maybe somebody knocks on his door and he'll go out and ride his bike. He doesn't take that console with him. But for girls, they take their little addictive habit with them everywhere they go, like a pack of cigarettes, it fits in their pocket. So they have it with them everywhere they go. And a lot of parents overlook this. They forget that. They think, oh my gosh, this phone is with her 24 hours a day. She is connected 24/7. That is enough to make anybody depressed and stressed and anxious. Just like as an adult, we have to come home from work and we have to walk in the door and take our shoes off and do a transition and whatever we do, get a cup of tea, whatever it is that we're going to do to relax and transition. These children that are on social media, they don't transition. They never transition. They're always at work. Social media is work. Building your brand is work. They never get off. They never really come home. They never get a break. They have their phone with them all through the night. They're sleeping with their phone in the bed. They wake up first thing in the morning before they get out of the bed. They have to look at their phone. It becomes something that they never spend any time alone, and they never spend any time unplugging from their audiences. And this is extremely unnatural, and it's extremely stressful. And part of the reason why is the portable nature of the device. Some games have natural stopping points. We know that social media is an endless scroll. There are no natural stopping points. They go on and on and on and on and on and on, and they're never done. The success is very easy to measure in a video game, and it's very hard to measure on social media. In fact, it changes every day. The rules change. Can you imagine? You think you know what you're supposed to be posting, and then, the influencers change all the rules the next day. There's no rhyme or reason. And that's why people are so addicted to social media, because everybody's just trying to figure out the formula. And, the formula changes all the time. So you can't figure it out. The time investment kind of pays off, if you can use that term. I don't think it pays off at all in a video game, but it kind of pays off for what the boy is doing in his game. He's getting better in his game. But the time investment, the hours that are wasted on social media, again, point to stress. It's very stressful. This child has nothing to show for their time. Now, gamers don't have much to show for their time either, but they can say, oh, I won a raid, or, I did a Fortnite thing and I won. But girls on their phones have nothing. There's just nothing tangible to show for it during a period of time where they should be creating. Our kids need to be creating something every day, something real, like art, like, even knitting, all sorts of building, even in sports, in a way you're creating when you're getting your mile time down or when you're getting better at tennis. But the phone it's like a bottomless pit, and they don't have anything to show for it. The less time people spend on social media, the less symptoms of depression and loneliness they feel. These are studies. We have a lot of research on our website that talks about the studies and the research around this. Now, some people are super interested in all that. As a parent, I would suggest that you do look at some of the research, but what I want you to do is look at your home. You need to look at your own kids. And I actually talked to a gentleman today. I was out doing an errand, and this topic always comes up, and he found out what I did. It was so interesting. He told me, I don't need any research to tell me there's a problem with my 19-year-old who's sitting on the sofa and won't get a job. So the research is great, but don't get too buried in that. So the mental health struggle, what we know from the research is that heavy use of screen media doubles. The research actually says 2.5 times more likely to be diagnosed with depression, to be on mental health drugs, and to have anxiety. So it doubles your child's risk. Now, not every child is going to have stress and anxiety if they're on their phone. Typically, if children are really super well balanced and they have a lot of friend time in person, and they have maybe a lot of sports they're involved with, they have a lot of extracurriculars and outside activities, they might not be obsessing over social media. It is very hard not to obsess over social media. It's very hard for adults not to obsess over it. So you can imagine for our kids, it's really tough for them not to. But if they have a lot of balanced activities, they may be okay. The one thing about trying to balance, I'll say, the one thing about trying to balance it and moderate it is very difficult. And you can do fine for a week, and then the next week they kind of fall off the edge, and I'm sure you've seen this with your own kids, like, well, they were fine when we first got the phone and they were only using it a couple hours a day. But what happens, because of the nature and the persuasive design of social media and of video games, it makes you use it more. So your child is not going to be able to outsmart the neuroscientists that made the persuasive design for social media. They just will not be able to do it. And adults can't do it either. So they're going to use it more and more. So just quickly, I want to go through a few points here just that deal with social media and teens, specifically with why there's so much anxiety, especially around girls. There's this thing called doom scrolling. I don't know if you've ever heard this term, but this is when you have this compulsive obsession to search for bad news and kind of ugly negative content. Now, we know that on the evening news, the good stories never make it to the top. So there's something in our human makeup that we love bad news. And so it's called doom scrolling, where kids and adults as well, but kids, when they start searching and going down these rabbit holes of all these terrible things and these terrible stories and all the violence and who got shot where and just all the really gross content, it gets very depressing and causes a lot of anxiety, because we know that when we are influenced, by that, we are going to have a negative response to it. If we are going to read nothing but good news, then we'll probably be in a good mood. But if we're going to read really bad news all day, it's going to kind of put a damper on our emotional state. And there's no way you can read all that bad news and not get a little stressed and anxious. It's depressing to read this all the time. And this is a trap that a lot of kids fall in. In fact, boys fall into this. They will want to start sharing the grossest thing they can find, which is very common. Girls actually post more pictures of themselves. Boys post gross things they find on the internet. I'm sure that's shocking. This interruption of their identity development. We know how kids are supposed to find their identity, and it's not by going on social media and trying to be in different groups and trying to fit in everywhere you are. Your identity must come from your family, from the adults and caring adults in your life, and your coaches and your teachers. And identity development for teenagers must be done in person when they are hanging out in social settings. Back in the day, we all go to the mall and we'd all hang out and eat and do whatever. And it was just through all of that, you start seeing, okay, you like this, you don't like this in this person, or someone who, runs cross country and, you like that and you want to also be an athlete. So, but this identity development has been shifted online. And what we have online is just what I call the city dump. Most of it is just the city dump. Our kids are being exposed to way too many things and they're confused. They're in that stage of confusion because they don't have their identity figured out yet. They don't know who they are yet. And that is their job. The loss of empathy in our culture is also very significant Natalie, I'm sure you've done and seen research on this. The numbers are getting really bad. And the reason why is because you cannot develop empathy on a screen. You have to be in the presence of another person to feel their pain. It's very, very difficult to feel someone's pain on a screen. This is why kids can be very mean. Adults can be mean too, but kids can be very mean because they don't see the reaction from the person they're being mean to. And we have studies, we see studies where when people are in person, it's much harder to be mean to that person than when they're behind a curtain. Then you can be mean to them. It's crazy how our human brain works. The delayed maturity is something else that we find in kids who spend way too much time in the digital world. They are not maturing. And the reason why they're not maturing is because they're not practicing life skills. Video games and social media, smartphones, pornography, none of those things are life skills. So if you take just a second and think about that, I believe that when I went through all the trouble that I went through in my house, and from all the parents that I've worked with over the last 8 years, we have this weird idea that learning how to use social media is a life skill that our kids need. Let me tell you, it is not. A 4-year-old can do it. It is not a valuable life skill. In fact, it's not a life skill at all. The reason why the maturity is so delayed and why the American Academy of Pediatrics even is lowering the age or raising the age, of adulthood is because kids are not getting out in the real world. The same gentleman I talked to today said that his son was 19 years old. He couldn't even drive to get his hair cut and pay the person and tip the person. He still had to have his mom go with him. These are the kinds of things that this poor dad is so worried about, as he should be. Can your kids go to the post office? Can they change a tire? Can they make a meal? Can they clean out the refrigerator and know what's rotten? I don't know. I don't know that kids are doing a lot of that these days. We're not letting them do chores because they're playing Fortnite while we do the dishes. And we're not letting them dive in and do their laundry because they're busy on their social media. So the maturity is delayed because life skills are not being developed. The other thing the other problem with social media is the comparison and all the envy that's developed and the lack of privacy on social media. I want you to think about this for a minute. Just think about this. What if I were right now to walk in your front door and go look at your pantry or go look at your closet? I mean, you'd probably be like, no, this is my stuff. It's private. You don't want people in your business. But every day, our kids are on social media. Nothing is private anymore. There's absolutely nothing that that is sacred. And so with that lack of privacy comes a ton of anxiety. The idea of disorders being contagious is fascinating. So when a child is on social media and they are spending a lot of time in eating disorder group, let's just say, for example, an anorexia chat room, they are going to start feeling the symptoms of anorexia, and they are going to start becoming like the people in that chat room. So the more time they spend, it is a contagious effect where they will take on the symptoms and they will actually start throwing up when maybe they weren't gonna ever have anorexia, but the fact that they're hanging around this and it makes them have the symptoms. And so this is why we say it's contagious. I think that the idea of social media being very powerful is very hard for a child as well. So the powerful nature, and what I mean by this is when a child has a social media account, and when we say smartphones, we're talking about social media. That's why kids want smartphones. They're not on their smartphone to look up, Excel spreadsheet. Kids aren't getting addicted to those things. They're getting addicted to social media. So when they have their smartphone, with that one little device, with this little bitty device, they can have so much power. They actually can make fun of somebody. They can be mean to somebody. They can bully somebody. Just with this little thing, they can totally ruin somebody's life. They have power over their home with this because this is making their mom and dad crazy. This is making people fight in their house. We're having conflicts. The idea of a child having the power that's behind a smartphone is very, very anxiety producing for them. Just with a click of a button, they can ruin somebody's day. Nowhere in our history have we ever had children have this much power. And then, of course, the final thing is the loss of protection. And what I mean by that is once we hand over this device, then their parents can no longer provide a shield. They can't guard them anymore. And that is the job of us as parents. Our job is to protect and guide our kids through the stages so they can do each stage of development really well. And so they can then launch into adulthood without being too scarred. I'm not talking about overprotecting and over sheltering. That gets a lot of negative attention in our culture. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, middle school kids should not know terms of what's happening in pornography videos, for example. That's one way that parents have lost their ability to guard and protect their kids. There are no guardrails anymore. Kids are all over the place. We have sixth graders trying to figure out what all this stuff means when they should never even be exposed to it at all. If we expose it to them, if we expose them to it, we think somehow we are building resilience, and we are not. We are making it worse for them, because you don't build resilience around an addictive activity by exposing your kids more to it all the time. And I'm sure we're going to get this in the Q&A too. I'll go back to that. But the truth about social media is that it is not designed for teenagers. Think about that. It is a marketing platform that is designed to get data from the user so it can advertise and sell things back to the user. That's not something that teenagers need. We have a few commercials on the TV, and that's enough. That's all we need. I said a minute ago, it's not helping them develop a rare life skill, and it is not necessary to build friends. And this is where most of y'all are going to raise your hand. You're going to say, oh no, this is where my kids connect. They are not connecting on social media. They are not connecting. I have to say it again. You connect in real life. You connect when you're in the presence of someone. That's when you connect with them. Social media for adults is okay because we've already connected with our friends in real life. We've already had our college friends and our high school friends and our business friends. And now we can get on social media and we can shoot a few notes back and forth and we can keep up with people. But adolescent, this stage of development, they have not done the initial building of their friends yet. So it's impossible for them to do that on social media. It's impossible. We cannot build friends on social media. We have to be together with people to build those deep layers of friendship. And it's also impossible to block the social media porn, I call it. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but parents think, well, I think it's okay for my kid to have a phone because I've got parental controls and I'm just going to block everything. Well, let me tell you, you cannot block social media porn. And what I mean by this, if you allow any of these sites, and these are just a few, if you allow any of this, your child will be exposed to pornography, period. It's the end of story. Your parental control will not keep all the porn images from TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat. Twitter, by the way, is one of the worst. Pinterest is actually one of the worst porn providers in our country because every porn star has a Pinterest board. And I have just a really brief picture here to show you. This was under a search for Bob Ross paintings. We typed in a search and this is what we got. So if you think that you can go into Pinterest and filter that, you can't. You can't go into Twitter. You can't go into Snapchat. You can't say, I want my kid to have Snapchat, but only the good part of Snapchat. You either allow it all or you don't. And I think this is really important for parents to understand because I didn't understand this back when I was going through all this with all my kids. So the three basic human needs that all kids have is the need for autonomy, the need for competence, and the need for belonging. And the virtual world doesn't cut it for these three things. Autonomy is being out in the real world and learning how to be your own person and how to go get your own hair cut by yourself. Competence is learning to get really good at a skill, at a life skill or a trade. And belonging is, of course, very easy to understand. We have to belong. The reason why we are in all the depression that we're in and the anxiety that we're in is because we are feeling lost and lonely. What boys need instead of a video game is a creative outlet. They need a tribe, and they need physical activity, and they need a lot of physical activity. There's a lot of problems with testosterone development when kids are not moving. They need their muscles to move. Can't stress that enough. They need a tribe. You, as a parent, have complete jurisdiction over this. You get to decide who your kids' friends are right now. And it's really important that you do that. It's not being mean or ugly. You're just saying, you know what? You get some parents together and you say, we want to do this a little different. We don't want to spend all our time on video games, and we don't want our kids on social media. So we're going to have social events at our house every weekend. You can have kids over. You can have Friday fun nights. Natalie, we have instructions on how to do that in middle school. It's really fun. And we do this now with my boys are juniors now in high school, and we have kids over here all the time. That's what they need. They're craving that. And they need a creative outlet. So our kids do a lot of music. Sports, of course, is wonderful. A lot of clubs. There's all kinds of things you can do. For girls need, they don't need a smartphone. Okay. They need also girlfriends, which is like their tribe. They need lots of girlfriends, but they need a journal. Boys need a journal too. But I would suggest tomorrow that you go get a journal for your daughter and say, would you please start writing your thoughts in here instead of writing your thoughts on social media for the whole entire public world to see. Let's just keep it in a diary and keep it under your bed. And they also need physical activity too. If your kids are starting to feel depressed or anxious or stressed, if you can get them moving, get them outside, they're going to feel better because those natural endorphins are going to be released. So what is the best age to get a smartphone? This is the $1 million question. We recommend, I wrote on the slide here, we recommend a GAB phone. And a GAB phone kind of looks like a smartphone, but it is just talk and text. The plan that we recommend is the plan that does not allow any group texting. Group texting is not a great idea, and it allows no media sharing. So there's no apps, there's no internet. It's just talk and text. If you use the code STRONG, you can get a discount with that phone. But the best age for a smartphone is what I believe, what the phone companies say the best age is, and that's 18, because that's when a child can actually buy their own smartphone. You have to be 18 to buy a smartphone, and there's a lot of reasons for that. We believe the solution is to hit that pause button on social media and on those smartphones and even on the video games. It's 48 months of high school. It is not very long. That's not very long. A talk text phone works perfectly. So as I wrap up, because I want to get into some questions here just for a second, but as I wrap up, these are my two boys, and I've just put this up here because a few weeks ago, they did a podcast on what it was like growing up without video games and without a smartphone. And I think it would be interesting for y'all to listen to this. And there's also, this is also a good one for your kids to listen to, because it's just two kids talking about what their life is like. And then this is a podcast I did on the social media effects on girls, where I get into a little more, just a little more stuff about rejection. I think that's one thing, Natalie, I didn't have time to cover tonight, but for girls, there is this thing called rejection dysphoria, and it's very painful for a girl to feel like she's being left out of a social situation, which happens almost every day on social media. And Natalie, I know you feel, but that's probably the presenting problem when kids come into you. They're very upset because they got hurt. They got their feelings hurt. And the age of 15 is the peak age for the most pain from rejection. It's the age of 15. So if you know that they're going to feel the most pain around the age of 15 when they get rejected, then you have to put the brakes on and just delay all the social media. What will happen once you start having friends and once you can start convincing some other parents to do the same thing, her social world will be full. She doesn't need 500 friends. In fact, the science says that teenagers only need a couple friends. There's this thing called the Dunbar number, and it says we only can be close to 5 people at a time. And that includes your mom and dad and maybe a brother. So it only leaves you space for a few friends. Our kids don't need 500 friends. It's making them really, really stressed. So how to improve the situation? You've got to reduce the stress. You have to reduce access. They cannot have access 24 hours a day. If you want them to have a phone, then maybe they have it for an hour, and that's it. Whoever said that they have to be connected 24/7? That's crazy. As far as video games, I honestly don't see any use at all for a video game. So we'll have to talk about that later. You have to learn how to strengthen their core life skills and start finding activities where they can find purpose and productivity. And then you want to focus on building relationships. And it takes time. It takes time from parents. And you have to kind of get reinvested in your kid. We have a new course coming out that I'm hoping, Natalie, we can work with the school and get some codes for y'all. This is a really good way. Since COVID hit, we decided to put all our material on an online parent course because I'm not out. I can't do as many presentations. And so I've taken all of my material and I put it into 2 sections. And one is Kids, Brains, and Screens, where we go through a deep dive and all the things I touched on today. And then the second part of that course are the solutions. And the solutions, we go through the steps. And they're so good. I'm so excited about it. But we go through the steps on how to create a ScreenStrong home and how to change your lifestyle so your kids are not so dependent on their screen media. So Natalie, let's see if we've got any questions. We've got a few minutes left. So do you have any to start with?
I took a lot of notes, and I just... so many things just really spoke to me. Thought I unpinned you, but yeah, a couple of things where you said you can't develop empathy behind a screen, and I of course know that on some level, but just to hear that, it makes so much sense because we're really seeing a lack of empathy right now for middle schoolers, and you've kind of been blaming it maybe on COVID, but maybe it's COVID, but they were behind the screen so much. It all makes sense, so that really spoke to me. And just the whole, I never really thought about the lack of privacy, and then the feeling of power, or the, and how those things can cause anxiety. I just thought that was really eye-opening.
We have a mental health lesson in our course, and I go through those in much deeper levels in there. And I think there's a lot of things in our culture that we see off the cuff, but there are some things that I unpack in the course that I'm like, these are underlining things that we never think about. But imagine what you would feel like if tomorrow I took you to the airport and I said, okay, Natalie, you're going to get in the 747 and you're going to fly it. You're going to be stressed out of your mind, right? It's too much.
Yeah.
You can drive a car, but flying an airplane is quite different. And the stress around how powerful it is, and the power that they have to, you watch it every day. I watch it every day. The power that a teenager, that a child, and I don't want to throw them all under the bus, but the power that they have to destroy somebody's life is just too much. They don't want all that power. And we know plenty of kids that just say, Mom, take my phone away. They want to be kids. They need to be kids. If they don't develop really well through each stage of development, they are going to suffer when they are adults. We have to go through the process. Parenting is not about doing everything early and being the first and skipping levels. That never works. Success is always about doing things in the proper order and in the proper time. So I think it's that the idea around power, it is too much. It's almost too much for adults to handle. It's certainly too much for teenagers to handle.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've got some other points or questions, but I want to give other folks a chance. If you guys want to unmute, or if you want to type up a question in the chat box, we can.
I wanted to ask a question. I have 3 children, 4th grade, 6th grade, and 9th grade. And we've been resistant with giving social media to our children. And as a matter of fact, even, giving them access to iPads and all sorts of stuff.
Good.
Nevertheless, good.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, 2 of them do have iPhones, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that, the feedback that I receive from our kids is that if you don't have social media, if you're not like everybody else, and that's the way how they communicate, these children. That's the way how you're part of a group. That's the way how you're part of the tribe. Yeah. And to that point, my 4th grader said he gets teased because he doesn't have his own iPad and he doesn't have a phone. Right. So how do you walk the boundaries of, making this a taboo item, and now the child feels embarrassed because they're the only ones that don't have what everybody else has.
Right.
And so that causes a social distress also. Yeah,
it does and it doesn't. That is a myth that kids need to, that they can only have friends if they, if they can be part of the group online. What you have to understand is, first of all, what your values are. Every family has to make a decision on what their values are. And then your children can learn to be okay being different. Being different is really, as parents, what we are going to have to impart to them anyway, because you can't the rest of your life be like everybody else. You have to learn to be okay in your own skin. And so if your family values, like our family values, are that we don't value social media. Sure, we have it for our business and our jobs, and we use it for a tool, but we don't value social media for our social lives. And so if you listen to Andrew and Evan, last year they had a podcast and this year they have a podcast. It's really interesting to listen to their perspective. There's also another podcast on our channel with 3 children that you should listen to. It was the Arlene Pelican's Kids in Their Own Words is what it's called. And it's 3 kids about your ages of your kids talking about growing up without social media and without video games. It is absolutely a pathway that works very well. In fact, it works so much better than the stress and anxiety that they're going to get being on their phones and keeping up with everything. It's just day and night, the difference. So we have a Facebook group as well called ScreenStrong Families. We have a lot of parents that come in there because they're taking their kids' phones away. There's about 5,000 parents in there right now that are very actively talking about what to do if I take this away. And what you will see, the common thread in all of the testimonies, is that we got our kids back. They are fine. There's a few weeks where it's really weird, but then they're fine. And they have their friends that come over to the house. Our boys, remember, we live right here in North Carolina, right? We're close to y'all. And they're fine. They have so many friends. When your children get off of social media, they are going to have so many more friends because they're not having friends on social media. They're keeping up and they're comparing themselves and they're making fun of people and they're doing all sorts of things, but that's not really the values that you probably want for your kids. So will they be embarrassed? Sure. That's their stage of development that they're in. And they need to work through that really well. Coming home to you, sitting down, having dinner with mom and dad, talking about their feelings of embarrassment, talking about their awkward feeling. And then, the next day it's better. And then the next day it's better. And the next day it's better. Middle school is the hardest stage to get through. If you can make it through middle school, then it's so much easier to get through high school without having all this. Our goal is not to make sure that our kids never have any bumps, never have any speed bumps in their growing up, or never have any stress. We get to pick the stress. And the stress of not having a phone is nothing like the stress of having a phone. Yeah. I could go on and on with that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You have to be okay being different. But that's true.
I say that to them all the time.
Yeah, keep saying it. Don't back down. You smile. One of the best advices I ever got was from a very strict coach, and she told me, when your kids are wanting to quit, you just smile. You just smile. You do not get on their roller coaster, and you do the next best thing for them. And the best thing is to lessen the amount of time that they're spending in these toxic places. So don't lose your principles. Stick to your guns. They will be fine. No child has ever died from not having a smartphone. But many have died because they've had it. So
Thanks.
I know the other day I had a young lady sitting in my office, and we were waiting on some other group members to come in, and she was, I don't have TikTok, or probably should, just so I know what's out there, and she was explaining, you were talking about the rejection, and I did not realize that they can post something and then they look to see how many likes they get. But I did not realize that they also see how many views they get.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I didn't know that. So a girl might post something like you were talking about, how they need to get more provocative because, to get the likes. So she might post something and then she can see that 180 people looked at it. She had 13 likes.
Yes.
That got to feel horrible, like everyone looked at it, but no one liked. And then she described to me this whole culture around liking things. Like she said, I always try to like people's things just, to be kind. But some people don't do that. And some people,
I know.
You get what I'm saying? Some people
Yeah.
like people they're really trying to get to be their friends.
It's a weapon. They use it as collateral. It's called social collateral, and they're wheeling and dealing.
Yeah,
and
it's a whole culture around who do you like and who do you don't like, and then who you don't like their videos. So people are also looking at who's doing what and who's liking who's, and trying to figure out why they didn't like that one or why they did like that person's video. There's just a whole nother layer of stress that I said, oh, that sounds horrible.
Well, it is horrible. And they will have the rest of their life to deal with all that when their brain is more able to deal with it. We are hurting our kids so much by treating them like adults. And I'm talking about 10th and 11th graders too. They do not need this. It is not necessary. All the stuff that Natalie just explained, what a nightmare. What a waste of time. What a utter and complete waste of a teenage brain, which happens to be the most, the biggest time in your life that you can learn the most, okay, is when you are a teenager. That is when your brain is the most active. The highest level of learning potential happens then. And we all know that. We could all stop and try to learn a foreign language right now, but it'd be really hard. It's really easy for them to do it, but we are wasting all that time, that what I call the 48-month period of time, when they should be focusing on how to put a car together, right? How to plan a party, how to be how to do an interview, and how to make eye contact with an adult. All these things are really important. Deciding and figuring out how many people viewed my TikTok video versus how many people liked it is so counterproductive to any life skill that they need to be doing. But not only is it counterproductive, it is hurting them, and it's causing these deep scars that many kids will not get over. There will be permanent damage over this. And we could probably all sit around here for another hour and talk about a mean thing that happened to us in middle school. And here we are, how many years later, and we still remember it. These kids have a catalog of mean things. They're getting mean things. They're getting rejection all day long. Natalie, I don't know why everybody in middle school isn't in your office every day, because they probably should be if they have social media. And I mean this very seriously. We are not an organization that is on the fringe and believes all these crazy things. We're not screen free. We believe school screens are fine to do homework. We believe you can sit down and watch a movie with your family, but we believe that there are certain screens that are very toxic for kids. And those screens are video games, social media, and pornography. The use of technology for those things are toxic for a teenager. Parents need to, like me, do the research, figure this out, and then we don't have much time. We don't have much time. When I decided to go have a game-free home for my younger boys and that they weren't having smartphones, I realized I only have 48 months of high school to have an influence on them. That is not much time. I do not get to go back and hit the redo button. I don't get to do it again. They are fine. They are so fine. And we would never go back. And the families that go through our ScreenStrong program and decide to delay these addictive screens never regret it. No one has ever said, oh, shoot, I wish I had given my kids more screen time. No parent has ever said that, but most parents would say that was one of the biggest mistakes we ever made. The problem, Natalie, is that we don't get to redo it. So you make the mistake and you can't go back. And it's really hard with your first few kids because you don't know, you know.
Yeah. Oh, every time after I hear you speak, I wish for a redo, but yeah, you can't.
Yeah, no, you can't.
Yeah.
And you're never going to take a risk by not letting them have it. They will bellyache all day long. Oh my goodness. And you are just going to smile, not be rude, but you're just going to say, honey, when you were 18, you can get a phone. Let's go make some cookies. Change the subject and go. The older your kids are, the harder it is to pull them off. We have a 7-day detox that would be great for the school to do. Where the kids don't do video games and smartphones for a whole week, and they write an essay about it. So we should definitely talk to y'all more about that. And then we have a 30-day detox that comes with our courses that we have, where we walk you through for 30 days. You know, if you say to them, you can say to your teenager, you know, guys, we're going to take a break for 30 days. We're just going to see what happens. And during that time, we give you all the tips to help you prepare for that. The second part of our course is all about this: how to fix your home, how to get the games in the house, you know, the board games, not the video games, and how to do different things to make that experience really good for your kids. You'll end up talking to your kids more, spending more time with them, and families just don't go back. After they do 30 days, they're like, oh my gosh, I will never go back. So you can start with your teenager. For the gal that asked the question a minute ago, you can just say, guys, we're going to do something crazy, and we're going to go 30 days without social media or even your smartphones. The Gab phones are really, really inexpensive, and they're only $20 a month, and there's no contract. So you could even get a Gab phone for them for a month and say, this is what we're going to do. And then if you like it, just keep up with it and jump in our Facebook group. We are this summer going to transfer that group over to a private forum, because I don't like all the distractions and the time waste on Facebook. So we're going to move to a private forum for that group, but we will help you. We've got your back. We have many, many families that have done this. We know how to help you. And then if you want to think about it after your kids go to college, you can say, okay, well, maybe I would have done it different, but I can guarantee you that you won't regret it. It'll be the best decision ever to hit that delay button.
And another time, Melanie, you'd mentioned, and I know Miss McDuffie's on, she had mentioned this to me too, at one point, you know, getting families, like,
yes,
you do this, you get other families with you to kind of come together. So it's not just your child.
That is the number one most
yeah.
important thing to do. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up. So for the course, and Natalie, you've seen the course before.
Yes, the course is excellent. It really is. It's just phenomenal.
And what you can do is get a group of 5 people together, get 5 of your friends or your kids' parents' friends, and do the course together like a book club. Have a discussion group, maybe do 2 lessons a week, get through it, and decide together as a group. For the gal that had the question a minute ago, decide together with 2 or 3 other friends that y'all are going to do this. It is so much fun to do. It's very hard to do by yourself. I totally get that. It's really good when your child has at least one other friend who is also not going to be living on social media. Remember what I said about the Dunbar number. They do not need 500 friends. If you can find 2 or 3 friends, and I tell my kids all the time, if you get through your high school years and you make one good friend, you are more blessed than anybody in this country, because kids don't have best friends like this anymore. They are very fickle. Their relationships are very fickle, and everything's online, and they don't have those stories of all the fun, cool things they did with their friends. You know, Natalie, you know, in high school, your friends that you had, I know the friends I had, and I can just sit here all night and tell you stories about the fun things we did, but kids can't do that anymore. And that's what I changed in my boys' life. I was like, forget this. We're going to make some fun. We're going to have some stories. I want you to have something to tell your kids when you have kids about how fun your adolescent time was. And my oldest son will come on camera and tell you that he had the worst childhood. And that breaks my heart. He has no stories. He has nothing. He sat in the basement and played video games. And that's what our girls are doing too. My daughter made it just fine without a smartphone. She's not that old. She made it just fine without a smartphone. She went to college. She did not binge and go crazy on social media. That's the big myth that parents believe, that they're going to binge and go crazy. Well, let me tell you, my son played video games all through high school, and guess what he did? He's the one that binged and went crazy when he went to college, and he dropped out because of his gaming, because he decided he was going to game because I wasn't there to set the kitchen timer and get him off of his game. So he just quit going to class. Those are the kids that binge and go crazy, not the ones that grew up without it, that filled their life with wonderful stories and activities and fun things and hobbies and interests. Those kids are much more interesting.
Right.
I know we're running out of time. I could go on forever. I would love to come back. So.
Definitely. Well, yes.
I know everybody's mind is kind of blowing, like, oh my gosh, what is this lady talking about? But I know what I'm talking about, trust me. So.
Absolutely. Well, I will provide, this is being recorded, and when I send out the link, I'll send out links, as I mentioned earlier, to the podcast, to the Facebook page, all of that stuff. So
yeah,
keep everyone.
And think about doing this as a school, and think about doing the challenge school-wide, or maybe with a class. It could be just a class. It could be a grade. It's wonderful.
If any of
I
you
was gonna say just one thing. The children have no understanding of this. Right. And they have no appreciation of the fact that social media is bad. And in fact, I keep telling them, I just sent an article to my son about Discord that was on CNN. And it's really, how do we educate the children more than the parents? Because we parents get it, but they don't. They do not.
So the movie, The Social Dilemma, if you have not seen that, you could see that, and your kids can watch that. It's a fabulous movie. I think it's still on Netflix. It's a documentary called Social Dilemma, The Social Dilemma. We were also in a documentary, my family and I were in one just recently on A&E, called Voices Magnified, the Youth Digital Crisis. That can be watched as well. The course that we have through the organization here, through ScreenStrong, you can actually sit down and go through some of the modules with your kids. Natalie, I know we were going to talk about what age you thought it was appropriate. I think middle school and up is fine on that course. There's a lot of things in the course that talk about the brain development. There's a deep dive into video games. There's a deep dive into the social media. And then we just added a mental health lesson that you can go through with your kids. You're absolutely right. They can read books. They could read the books that I wrote about my son and about our daughter that we did a different pathway with. There are some books there's one called Glow Kids that if they want to read, it depends on how much they want to get into it. My goal, my real passion is, after this project is now done, what my next project is going to be is to create some material for teenagers specifically that is just shorter, because their attention span isn't quite what ours is. But that's a very good point. If you watch The Social Dilemma, watch that movie first and then let them watch it if you want. It's fabulous. And it shows exactly what is going on behind the scenes in a very creative way. Natalie, have you seen that? I can't remember.
Yes, I have. I need to watch it again, though. It's been a while. I need to see that again and start.
There's another one called Screened Out that I was in as well, and Screened Out is very good. It's a very easy to understand documentary about what's going on. CNN did a documentary maybe 5 years ago, called Being 13. You can find it on YouTube. It's still one of my favorites, talking about 13-year-olds being on social media. So yeah, that's a great point. But remember that you are their coach. You don't have to convince them. And that's what I want to end with tonight, that parents, you have the power. You have the wisdom. And we want to be respectful, of course, of our kids, just like a coach is respectful of their team. But they don't let them vote teams don't vote on what they do. The coach decides that. The coach knows what is best. And if you take over that mentality, and instead of trying to be the best friend parent, like I think I probably tried too many times, all of a sudden I had a whole different perspective when I realized that I am my child's best advocate. I am their coach. I don't want social media to coach my kids. And you would never hear of an NFL team allowing other coaches to come in and coach their players. That's crazy talking. We would never do that. But by handing over all of this in the outside world, that's exactly what we're doing. And we cannot build responsible use by giving kids more access. Responsible use is built by having less access to the problematic activity. In fact, we know from research that people who build willpower and discipline, they build it by staying away from the addictive problem, not by getting into it every day. Kids only have willpower for a minute. That's it. They're not going to be able to withstand the temptations and just the time suck that these screens present. They're just stealing our kids' time. So these are some of the topics that we break down further in the course that I think are really eye-opening when we look at what we're dealing with. And we don't have much time to go fix it. So good luck. Go team.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and those of you that are going to be listening after the recording is done. And Melanie, we appreciate your time and your passion, your information, and
thank you. I love talking about this and helping people. And if you need to email me, it's Melanie, MELANIE at ScreenStrong.com. And I try to get to all of my emails. Sometimes I don't, but email me again if you don't hear back from me. But I'll be happy to help any way I can.
Well, I look forward to talking to you in the near future about the course and how we can implement that at Pine Lake. So
yeah, that'll be great.
Next on the agenda. But
okay.
Thank you everyone for joining us.